only one party in this House letting the side down, the Labour Party.
So Theresa May made her last appearance at Prime Minister's Questions. With Johnson taking over mere hours after this exchange, it was always going to be interesting. It's fair to say that a lot of the questions and responses were more fiery than normal, with a lot more comments about the incoming Prime Minister. So let's take a look at some of these exchanges and we can discuss what they mean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I profoundly disagree with many of the decisions the Prime Minister has made and many of the things she says. But I recognise that she does have a respect for public service and for the future of our country. So how does she feel about handing over to a man who, among many things, is happy to demonise Muslims, is prepared to chuck our loyal public servants and diplomats under a bus, and promises to sell our country out to Donald Trump and his friends?
I am pleased to hand over to an incoming Prime Minister who I worked with when he was in my cabinet and who is committed to delivering on the vote of the British people in 2016 and to delivering a bright future for this country.
The first question of PMQs came from Ruth Cadbury, who made clear her respect for the current Prime Minister and her concerns for her successor. This concern was made more clear later in PMQs, when the Westminster leader of the SNP made a similar comment. What's obvious from both of these questions is there's a lot of worry in the House of Commons about Mr Johnson, and some opposition parties have even used compliments about May's integrity to criticise what they perceive as Johnson's lack of integrity.
The mother of the House, Harriet Harman.
Even her harshest critics must recognise her integrity, her commitment to public service, her dedication to this country, and those are qualities that none of us should ever take for granted.
Can I ask the Prime Minister what advice she has for women across the country on how to deal with those men who think they could do a better job but are not prepared to do the actual work?
We've had 3 years of bungled negotiations, and we now have the spectacle of a Prime Minister coming into office with no electoral mandate, looking for a Brexit deal that has been ruled out by the European Union, or in the case of a no deal, ruled out by the majority in this House and by anyone that understands the dangers to the British economy of a no deal. The next Prime Minister thought the Isle of Man was in the European Union and that the European Union made rules about kippers that in fact were made by the government that he was part of. He also said the UK could secure tariff-free trade through Article 24 of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, despite the Trade Secretary, Attorney General, Governor of the Bank of England all confirming that is not possible.
Ian Blackburn. Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister-elect has no mandate in Scotland. Mr Speaker, Scotland deserves better. A snap YouGov poll shows 60% of people in Scotland are dismayed and disappointed by the new Prime Minister.
This criticism of Johnson isn't particularly surprising, given that a few months ago multiple members of Johnson's own party, the Conservatives, said that they'd leave the party if he became Prime Minister. That's yet to be seen, but it at least demonstrates that even within his own party, there's concerns about his credentials and whether or not he's a suitable Prime Minister. Although the House was quite critical of Johnson, and at times Theresa May too, which isn't uncommon for Prime Minister's Questions, there are a lot of genuinely kind comments about May and her time in office. These came from members of her own party, and even the leader of the opposition, which is very rare indeed.
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
As somebody who has not invariably seen eye to eye with the Prime Minister, may I thank her for her remarkable public service and for showing that highest of virtues, a sense of duty.
Today marks the final day in office for the Prime Minister, and I pay tribute to her sense of public duty. Being an MP, a minister, or indeed a Prime Minister is an honour that brings with it huge responsibility and huge pressures. So I hope, Mr Speaker, that she has a marginally more relaxing time on the backbenches and perhaps like the Chancellor, even helping me to oppose the reckless plans of her successor. Mr. Speaker, I've often disagreed with the Prime Minister and have many criticisms of her policies. However, I welcomed the reduction in the stake on fixed odds betting terminals, the adoption of the Children's Funeral Fund and scrapping employment tribunal fees. Which of these policies is the Prime Minister most proud of?
Corbyn asking Theresa May which of her policies she was most proud of is particularly rare, although he did then take a moment to highlight the successful policies he mentioned were all actually Labour policies.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister may have noticed that none of those things that I mentioned were actually in the Conservative Party manifesto in 2017, but every one of them was a Labour pledge in 2017.
Regardless, ordinarily the role of the opposition leader is to hold the Prime Minister to account, to criticise the government and what they're doing, to ensure the government is doing the best it can for the people it governs. However, as Ian Blackford said,
with the Prime Minister standing down today, the time for holding the Prime Minister to account has passed.
Obviously, as it was Theresa May's last Prime Minister's questions, there isn't that much criticising you can do at this point. The leaders of the opposition parties can't realistically ask her to change course, because in a matter of hours, she was going to be in the backbenches with virtually no power. So instead, the members of the House paid tributes to her efforts in one of the most demanding and high-profile jobs in the country. That isn't to say that the other party leaders didn't criticise her record, but unlike normal PMQs, they were a lot more respectful and rose above party politics more than normal. Having said that, we're now going to undermine that whole statement and show some clips of when normal PMQ stuff occurred. The classic ripping into the Prime Minister's record and trying to score some political points in front of the cameras in one of the most high-profile political events of the week.
Mr. Speaker, in the last 3 years, child poverty has gone up. Pensioner poverty has gone up. In-work poverty has gone up. Violent crime has gone up. NHS waiting times have gone up. School class sizes have gone up. Homelessness has gone up. Food bank use has gone up. Does the Prime Minister have any regrets about any of those things I've just said?
Another interesting thing to be noted from this PMQs is its emphasis on the Liberal Democrat leadership election. As Jo Swinson pointed out in her clip earlier, she's the first female leader of the Liberal Democrats or the original Liberal Party. This led Theresa May to make this response.
Can I also say to the Honourable Lady that I congratulate her on becoming the first woman, I believe, to lead the Liberal Party. My party's had 2 women leaders. The Liberal Party now has a woman leader. The SNP has a woman leader, as do the DUP. Plaid and the Greens have. Even, wait for it. Even the independent Tigger group, Change UK, or whatever they're calling themselves this week, are now on to their second woman leader. There's only one party in this House letting the side down, the Labour Party.
Theresa May is correct in this statement. Labour has, as yet, never had a female leader, whereas now all of the other quote-unquote major parties have, obviously ignoring upcomers like the Brexit Party. If we're going to get very technical, there have been caretaker female leaders of Labour, such as Margaret Beckett and Harriet Harman, but these were only temporary until a new leader was found. And this obviously doesn't detract from Theresa May's criticisms that Labour, the key left-wing party in the UK, has yet to elect a permanent female leader. Nonetheless, this is the end of the premiership of the United Kingdom's second female Prime Minister. With a difficult tenure and some of the biggest problems that any Prime Minister has had to face in the last half-century, May has certainly had a very difficult job. So here is her final response to the House. And if you watch to the end, notice how all of the members of Commons start clapping her as she leaves. As we mentioned in a previous video, there's a convention that members don't clap, but this convention is normally ignored at special occasions such as this.
I, of course, came here in 1997 as one of only 13 Conservative women, and indeed one Labour Member of Parliament approached me to encourage me to sign the private members' bill list because he assumed as I was a woman I must have been a Labour Member of Parliament. But I'm also proud to have played my part in getting more women MPs in this House, and I'm sure that amongst the women in this House today there is a future Prime Minister, maybe more than one. Later today, as I said earlier, I will return to the back benches, and it will be my first time in 21 years, so it's going to be quite a change from standing here at the dispatch box. I'm told that over the last 3 years I've answered over 4,500 questions, over 140 hours in this House. In future, I look forward to asking the questions. But we are, as the Right Honourable Lady has said, living through extraordinary political times. This House of Commons is rightly at the centre of those events, and that's because of the vital link between every single member of this House and the communities that we represent. That's the bedrock of our parliamentary democracy, and each one of us, wherever we sit, whatever we stand for, can take pride in that. And that duty to serve my constituents will remain my greatest motivation. Yeah.